Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to some EVE Online, and in today's video I want to talk a little bit about capital ship production in EVE Online. I think that my videos on the construction of an Orca in Solitude has prompted some interest from some of the viewers about getting into capital ship production, because I've been receiving some questions about it. Most of them really pragmatic and very logical about where would I go and build them, try and sell them, you know, what would be the best place to try and get into the manufacturing of capital ships. And so for this video I basically want to try and create a bit of a roadmap that I would try to use if I were to get started with EVE Online and wanted to get into capital ship construction. So at this point I am going to assume that you know the basics of manufacturing. So you basically have a place where you can manufacture, you know about blueprints. You're basically already making stuff like sub-capital ships, maybe some weapons, maybe some munitions, things like that. You know the basics. You basically want to no longer be just one of the small industrial players in EVE Online who produces a batch of 10 frigates and brings those to the market, but you actually want to get in on some of the big ships, the billion ISK ships, so some of those capital ships. And now at the very start I have to say you shouldn't be looking straight at those capital ships themselves, but you should be looking at the capital ship components, because that is still the very same mechanic. You get minerals from somewhere, whether it's mining, buying, freightering, contracts, your own corporation, and then you just start producing stuff like this, like a capital clone vat for instance. It's only minerals, the blueprint, and you actually end up with the product. Now these are pretty expensive. I have a couple of them here, 1.3 billion, 1.7 billion, 1.3 here again. I think there's a more a cheaper one here as well. Yeah, 900 million for capital drone bay blueprint. But for a new player this is still going to be a pretty significant investment, and so I think if you're going to start with maybe a couple of these blueprints, see if you can actually manage that increase in scale, and if you can actually make some ISK on that activity itself. I think it's definitely possible. Now not on all of them. If we take capital clone vat for instance, 9.8 million in input, output 6.8 million. It's probably a bit of a local price, but that is definitely not something that you want to produce a lot of. But if we take for instance these capital ship maintenance bay blueprints, you've got 60.5 million for the input, estimated output price 75 million. You know, just that activity itself, if you're taking the right blueprints, you're scoping out the market a little bit, is probably going to make you some ISK. And what I personally like a lot about this is that you have another avenue for cash flow, because you will want to do at least a little bit of research on those blueprints, and then you can start making copies for the market as well, which is what I'm doing here for instance, of course, creating copies of the capital ship construction parts blueprint, some for personal use, and then the rest I just bring to the market, sell on contract, making me a little bit of extra ISK to keep the operations running, and eventually to of course buy more blueprint originals of those capital ship construction parts. Now in this very first phase where you're basically trying to get some of those blueprints together to get your bases ready for the construction of ships itself, I must say don't worry too much about where you're going to sell that product. I would say that in this phase it's more important to find a good place to actually produce that stuff. Whether it's your own facilities, which personally I would recommend, just make your own Raitaru and get to work from there, or maybe find the right corporation or find the right place with very low taxes where you eventually find out that yeah, this is a good place, this is very stable, I can try to scale up to actual capital ships in this place right here. So this is going to be a bit of an exploration phase, and again don't worry too much about being able to sell locally. Nope, make it and then sell it in the trade hubs themselves. I think another big advantage of doing that would be that you will be able to get a much faster turnover, just because there's much more trading happening in those trade hubs, and that means more liquid ISK in your wallet, thus a better opportunity to buy cheap minerals or buy more blueprint originals and expand your business to a more diverse set of these blueprints. Now, once you feel comfortable about this, you actually made some of these, you've got a basis of all of that, you know whether it's more of a focus on industry for you, that you actually produce a lot of them, move them with a freighter for instance, or if you're more research based, but you know you want to scale it up, you know you want to keep going, that's when you can start looking for your first capital ships. And I think it's only logical that you don't start off with Titans or anything like that right away, and so your first ships are probably going to be the high-sec capitals. So you've got the Orca, of course. Let's take a quick look at that one, which is what I've been producing, so you already probably have a little bit of an idea of what this is going to take. But if we go into the industry tab here, you can see it takes 2, 4, 6, 7 blueprint originals, 7 different capital ship parts in order to create an Orca. This is doable, right? We're talking maybe 10 billion or something like that in different blueprints. This is something that's manageable on your own. On top of that, I think the Orca blueprint is like 900 million or something like that. So still manageable, doable in size, doable in volumes. This is something that, yes, if you have found the right place, you have a good way of getting your minerals, you can scale up to that. Focus on the Orca, for instance. I would say if you're doing a lot of research and blueprint copies as well, because to my surprise, I hadn't really looked at it, but if we go for the freighters, let's take a look at that. For instance, the Gallant freighter, the Obelisk, you only need 4 of them: capital propulsion engine, capital armor plates, capital cargo bay, and capital construction parts. That's really very doable, and even a solo player could get into the production of these capital ships, bring them to the markets and try to make ISK through all the different avenues, right? On cheaper minerals, on the parts themselves, on the blueprints copies, on the research. Maybe you have the patience for fully researching the blueprint originals, selling those for a profit, rebuying one, doing that again. All of those are possibilities and definitely ways of making money throughout the process of learning the construction of capital ships. And here again, in what I would call the second phase, right, you're actually producing capital ships, but they're the civilian capital ships, they're not the combat ships, and you're still doing that in high-sec possibly. I would say that here again, the big focus is not on where do I sell them or where do I optimize, what is the right market to actually make them and sell them in, but where is the right place for me to be producing these? Is it in my own facility? Is it within a small corporation? Is it close to a trade hub? Maybe that's what's right for you because you just buy and don't want to move the minerals too far away. All of that is really important at this phase, and I still think that the best option is to then make what you feel comfortable making, what you enjoy making, and try to sell it within a trade hub itself. You're just again going to get that faster turnover, you're going to sell your ships more quickly, meaning that you'll have a much better idea of playing the market, understanding the market, and thus also getting the liquid ISK and being able to scale up, maybe with new blueprint originals, maybe with more minerals, more stocks, and all of that good stuff. But this is all still doable for a solo player. It becomes a decent amount right here. For instance, I added some structured blueprints and we're quickly approaching 13 billion ISK in value. If I would need to move my operation now, it's still doable, but it's definitely on the edge. Moving 10-20 billion ISK in blueprints, you know, a really good tank ship, maybe a Tech 3 or something like that, to try and fly under the radar. You could still do it in a couple of trips, but you don't want to go that much further than this. And here again, I think your real focus has to be on finding the right place for yourself to manufacture these goods, and then to find what works best for you, whether it is a small pocket somewhere far away, your own facility, or again close to a trade hub because you don't like to do too much travel and logistics. All of that is what you definitely need to figure out on this phase before you plan to move on to the final phase, which of course would be the construction of other capital ships, which are combat capital ships not usable in high-sec. We're talking stuff like the Force Auxiliary, the carriers, the super carriers, the dreadnoughts, and the Titans, of course. And here, of course, I actually think that you have to let go of the idea of doing this solo or small scale. Just look at the necessary amount of blueprint copies. Here we're talking 13 different capital ship components in order to create a force auxiliary. That is a lot more ISK, that's a lot more management, that's a lot more stuff to own. At this point, honestly, if you're going to upgrade from the Orca and the freighters to even more capital ship production, make the step to a nullsec alliance. That would basically be my choice and my advice at this point. An alliance is going to give you so many more options, so many more facilities and services that I really think it's the only feasible way of considering going for some of these capital ship construction jobs. A big advantage, for instance, let's say that you've come to this part but you only have just the right blueprints for the freighter and the Orca. You won't need to buy all of them. If you look at the market for these blueprints, manufacturing and research components, standard capital ship components, we're talking 19 1 to 2 billion ISK blueprint originals. That is not something that you want to move anymore. That is not something maybe even that you want to own all by yourself within a single place. And an alliance will have blueprint copy services for you so that you can make the copies of your own blueprints, of course, but you can then also supplement that with the needed copies from someone else in the alliance. It's the very same thing with minerals. Most alliances have so the minerals needed, like right here, most alliances have buyback programs, and so you will probably have access to cheaper minerals than anything you've experienced before, because it stays within the alliance and they're all working towards that common goal. So you'll have services for blueprint copies, you won't need to own all the originals, you'll probably have cheaper minerals, and very importantly as well, you will have a ready market for you. Your alliance will be able to purchase any capital ship that you can produce, and maybe the biggest advantage on all of that is that it's no longer a solo thing anymore. You will get a lot of recognition for your efforts and for what you're doing for the alliance, whether it's ISK-wise, whether it's just because you make friends within the game or things like that. But yeah, let's be honest, if you're going for these types of capital ship productions, you'll want to go to an alliance and try to find the right one for you when it comes to that. But you definitely, I don't think, want to try to do that solo by yourself or in a tiny little corporation, maybe in a wormhole, but then it's still probably only going to be for your own personal use. You'll want the backbone of a decent alliance within EVE Online if you're actually going to upgrade to that. And that, I think, will become end game when it comes to capital ship production. So personally, I'm really impressed, and I really like the, for really new players, the crafting system within EVE Online, the industry in EVE Online. It has this smooth progression path, but it also has this really decently high ceiling for a solo player and small corporation players, up to capital ships that can be used in HiSec. We're still talking 1.2, 1.3 billion ISK for a single ship, with lots of blueprints, lots of investments and lots of time. But if you want to take that final step, I think it's normal and not bad for the game that it's basically pushing you to get out there into nullsec, to join a bigger alliance and become part of what a lot of players would consider to be the bigger sandbox within EVE Online, where your activities will actually have an influence on your alliance, and where the politics of the game itself might actually have an influence on what you do for them, what you do in the game. That's where you become a big player, and some people, like myself, that do prefer to be independent and that tend to play solo, may feel a little bit bad about being pushed into that kind of content, but we have to be honest here. I think that this is a major part of EVE Online itself. It's where a lot of the big stories come from, and that at some point you get to that point where the game basically tells you, get into that kind of content or you're not gonna get to scale up anymore. It's just normal, and it's something that we have to accept, and a choice that you as a player will have to make as well. But by that time, I think you'll have been playing EVE Online for quite a few years, and you'll probably be hooked by then, as most of us veterans are in EVE Online. And that was my roadmap for capital construction in EVE Online. I hope that this can help some of the newer players get a bit of an idea and maybe get the motivation and see a little bit of a pathway towards that goal if they have the aspiration of becoming a manufacturer of capital ships in EVE Online. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you all next time.